Let me ask you something. What is the best thing to come out of G5? A lot of people might say that is Misty, or a smaller portion of the community might say that the comics. But something that I think all of us can agree on is that the best thing to come out of G5 was the New Generation movie. Maybe because of the story, the characters, and even the music, but of course the animation. And believe it or not, the movie had a lot of cut content and ideas that we didn't get to see in the movie, but that in my opinion are pretty interesting. So today let's talk about the things and concepts that we didn't get in G5. We start with the designs. Something that I want to say is that I don't hate the designs for the main 5 in G5. I find them good, but there are a lot of things that they can improve. So it's surprising to me that the original designs of some of these characters were better or in instances worse than the ones that we got. But surprisingly enough, the first thing that I want to talk about is not the designs of the main 5, but instead the designs of the main 6, because the original idea for this generation was to use the main 6, although this would be with completely different designs and even different races, which end up being discarded, but we fortunately have the concepts and even the renders to look at. And I'm glad we didn't get this version of G5 because I would have found it pretty boring and monotonous, because basically it would have been more of the same from what we got in G4, or maybe even worse. Something that I like about G5 is the design for the ponies, because even the ones that seem so simple in design, they still end up standing out in their own way. So it's surprising that the G5 movie actually had a lot of different designs and even body types for the ponies, which look really good. Another thing that was changed but did appear in the movie was Argyle, especially his original design, and is not that different from the one we got. The only thing that changed was his colors, and I'm glad we didn't get this version of him. I don't know why, but this version of Argyle looks so boring compared to the one we ended up getting. Not only that, but we also get to see some different designs for his necklace, which look pretty cool. And we even see an Argyle in his older years, something that we didn't even see in the movie. Another character that was changed, but I think for the worst, was Sprout. Now, Sprout in the movie was okay, I just find him really annoying, but his original design was the opposite of that, where we see a Sprout that has a more confident look. Not only that, but from the design, we could assume he was meant to be a more confident and manipulative villain, which would have been a huge improvement for what we actually got, but sadly, we didn't see that. Another thing that was pretty interesting was the original main 5 designs, where we can see that the designs look more varied, but that still perfectly represent who the main 5 were gonna be, and in some cases they were gonna be totally different characters. We start with Hitch. Now, his original design was so simple, although his colors are cool, and it looks like he would have been the big brother of the group, or even the voice of reason, and while yeah, we saw some of that in the movie, I still can say that this idea for Hitch is a little better. But then we have Izzy. Now, Izzy on the movie is really different from what we know her as on the show, because nowadays a lot of fans say that she is a Pinkie Pie clone, and she can be somewhat annoying, especially in Make Your Mark. But on the movie she wasn't like that. Izzy on the movie is a naive but caring pony, that the only thing she wants is to find a friend. And the original design for Izzy shows that she was going to be more of a calm and even a spiritual pony, but still keeping the creative side to her, making her to be less of a Pinkie Pie and more like a tree hugger, which would have been pretty interesting to see. But now we move on to Zip and Pip. Now, these two have pretty unique designs. Let's start with Zip. Now, Zip has a great design in the movie, so it's surprising that the original design for her was the complete opposite of that. Now, I like the colors and the fade aesthetic on the hair is pretty cool, but I just find it kinda boring compared to the Zip we have now. But something that I find pretty interesting is that in the concept art, we can see that she would have been more of a rebellious character, kinda like a Rainbow Dash, and she possibly would have been the youngest out of the two. But we move on to Pip. Now, Pip's original design is pretty interesting, because we see that Pip still would have been a popular figure with a more casual attitude, or even someone who didn't want to be a famous pony in the first place, so she disguises herself with more casual clothes to blend in, and all of this sounds pretty interesting. And the last character is of course Sunny, where we see that Sunny's original design looked more like a mechanic or an inventor, which opens a lot of potential for stories and concepts in the movie or in the series, and this will be relevant later in the video, but we still have one more, which is Alpha Beetle. Yeah, believe it or not, the original design for him was going to be a completely different character from the one we saw in the movie. Originally, he wasn't going to be a gambling bartender, he was instead going to be a blind wise man that would have lived in a cave, which honestly fits more with the Briarwood aesthetic. Overall, I like most of these designs, and it's a real shame we couldn't see them on the movie, but then we move on to... A lot of the locations of the film also went under changes, some of them even affecting the plot of the movie directly. For example, before counter logic was even a thing, Sunny was originally going to work in a rainbow factory. Nope, not like that. Another place that was changed was in Zephyr Heights, where we would have seen a stage where Pip would have given her concerts, or the aforementioned Alpha Beetle's cave in Briarwood. And something else that looked different in the original pitch was Sunny's lighthouse, and these designs are pretty cool, especially this one. I just love the almost treehouse aesthetic that it has, and the interior reflects that perfectly. And of course there are more concepts that I didn't include, mostly because I don't have a lot to say about them, but they're still really cool. One of the most iconic moments in the movie was in the beginning, where we see the main six, and believe it or not, this part of the movie was surprisingly the part with the most changes. And originally, the main six were going to be introduced by a narrator, where we would have seen them break a window leaving behind a rainbow. Another deleted sequence that we didn't see in the movie was a scene where we see Sunny and her father playing with the toys of the main six, which in fact is very similar to that very old animatic that got leaked almost 5 years ago, so we can almost assure that that's a deleted scene. And those are not the only ones we have, because G5 ironically has a lot of deleted scenes, so let's go over them. For example, we have this sequence right here, which is an extended version of Sprout's song from the movie. Or this scene that is when they arrive at Izzy's house, which has more of a complete conversation in it, and they even mention Hitch's lack of jurisdiction, something that many of us questioned in the film. Another scene that is not quite different from the original one was Zip's conversation with his mother, which in this version it was going to be a bit more tense and serious than the one we saw originally. And of course we have these scenes right here, where we see that the ponies of Maritime Bay originally they were going to have a more active role in the movie. Not only that, but in the climax, where we even see that an old mare has a pair of machine guns, which look really cool and ridiculous. Essentially it's not very different from the one we saw, but this one does have a more exaggerated transformation for Sunny, in addition to Sprout receiving a punishment from her mother for his crimes. Surely you have heard cases where the movie has a previous version of its story that is very different from the one we get, and a new generation is not really that different. And the most surprising thing is that this version of a new generation could have been better or even more faithful to G4 than the one we got. In this version, several of the elements that I've talked about in this video were going to be present, like Sunny working in a rainbow factory, which by the way seems to have Twilight's cutie mark, which is bizarre to see. And not only that, but the main difference in this version of G5 was the overall story of the movie, where we could have seen the magic disappear over the course of the film, and with it, the electricity. Also in this version, the town where Sunny and Hitch lived, it was going to be surrounded by a wall to prevent the visit of the unicorns and Pegasi. But also the wall was going to serve as a way to keep air ponies in the town, and we would have seen Sunny and Izzy figuring a way to get out. Another thing that we would have seen in the movie was Pip's stage in Silver Heights, where the Pegasi crystal was in, and at that part of the movie it was losing his magic, so the group had to recover it before it was too late. And in that scene we would also see the Pegasi fly, since the magic hadn't disappeared yet. Also, the Pegasi in this version of G5 could control the weather, which would be really cool to see. Also, as a small detail, Zip and Pip's relationship would be somewhat hostile, to the extent that Pip would have served as an antagonist trying to stop the group. And as a smaller detail, in this version it is known that Sunny would have had a pet, and the ponies would have grabbed things with their mouths just like in G4. In addition to that, we would also see the presence of Timberwolves and Parasprites. And I know what you're thinking, so why did it change? Well, this version of G5 was changed after its first screening, not because it was bad, but because it was somewhat serious and it had a lot of dark humor, something that probably a lot of us would have loved to see, but in the end it was changed. Overall, I think this version of G5 could have worked really well, and even be better than the one we have right now, with a world that seemed more fleshed out and compared to the empty one we have right now, or at least that's how I feel. But on the other hand, I must admit that a lot of the things in this version wouldn't make much sense, like why is there a rainbow factory in the town? Not only that, but I know that some G5 fans would have hated to see Pip as a small antagonist, but outside of that I think this version of G5 could have been interesting to see. But what do you guys think? What are your opinions in this version of G5? And would you like to see more G5 videos? Leave it down in the comments. And remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe. And of course, thank you guys for 500 subscribers. Take care guys, I'll see you in the next video.